Oh yeah. Now you can see that it's going to start pulling together and forming a real dough rather than a liquid. Here's another thing that's optional. I like to add oatmeal. Gives it a little bit more of a nutty, grainy type flavor, and it helps go from the gooey stage into the really doughy stage where I can pick it up and knead it with my hands without getting too gooey. The same thing applies with just a little bit of the cornmeal to give it a little more distinctive flavor. And that this is all going toward getting the dough to be the right consistency. And I don't mind adding little tiny bits over and over again to get it just right. This probably takes some experience. You'll have to do it 2 or 3 times before you really get a feel for what the right amount of dough to baking mixture really is, or water to baking mixture. And then once I get that stirred up real good, I'm going to let it sit just a bit longer, go back and check the sausage. It's starting to cook pretty well. And while those things are happening, I'm going to go ahead and go back to cutting my vegetables. Okay. I'm going to tear out the parts of the pepper I don't need. I'll just throw those in the trash. I don't mind having a few seeds on there because that makes the pepper or the pizza just a little crunchier and it makes it taste good. I'm going to cut this in thin strips. This is the part where most people end up cutting their thumbs off if they're not careful. I'm going to try really hard not to do that. If you prefer to dice it, that's fine as well. That just means you come across and chop this way a little bit. But I just like to make it long strips. And if you have a gigantic pepper like this, you may end up with more slices than you really want on top of your pizza. So let's go into the freezer and hang around for your next pizza. Back to check the sausage again. Guess there's no particular reason you have to do all of this stuff at the same time. I just figure as long as I'm doing it and things need to rest and cook, it's good to do it all at once. I'm going to stir the dough a little bit more and get ready to do the actual kneading, which is the part that turns it into the final product that I'm going to spread onto the pizza pan. And while this is finishing up, I'm going to go ahead and get out the pan and prepare it. I just like the big old tin pan. You can use whatever kind of pizza pan you like. The only thing that needs to be done to the pizza pan is to put a little bit of oil on it. You can use regular canola oil or some kind of non-stick spray. It doesn't take very much, especially if your pan's been conditioned. But it's also very nice to take a little bit of the cornmeal and sprinkle it very lightly across the bottom of the pan. That was a little too much. So, you just hit it a little bit, get that stuff spread around. That looks nice. I'm going to be able to put the dough right on top of that, spread it out after I'm done kneading it. And in the meantime, I want to make sure my sausage doesn't burn it. It's looking like it's pretty well done. And if you really want to be healthy, you don't really want the pizza or the sausage turning black. You probably also would use a lower fat kind of meat, or maybe skip the meat altogether. But it makes it so tasty. While this is finishing up, I'm going to also preheat the oven now. I'm going to put it to somewhere between 400 and 450. The other thing I'm going to do is go ahead and turn off the burner under the sausage, and move my pizza pan out of the way to give myself a little counter space. And again, the paper towels are going to come out in force. A lot of other cooks will just drain the grease off by dumping it down the sink or putting it in a can or something. I just think paper towels are a little easier way to do it. Can be kind of tricky dumping the stuff out onto the paper towel, but if you're careful, you can do it without making too much of a mess, and you get all your grease soaked up in the towel and your pizza will be much healthier for it. I'm going to go ahead and compress this in the paper towel. Do a little more of the grease soaking. And the next thing I'm going to do is go over and wash my hands, because after this I'm going to go knead the dough. I'm going to take the dough in my hands and squeeze it and work it around and stretch it a little bit and get it to where it's the right consistency to spread in the pan. I'm also going to keep a little bit of the baking mix handy in case the dough is still a little too sticky. And I'm also going to put a little bit of cooking oil onto my hands so that the dough won't stick to me. And the extra oil that ends up in the dough actually helps it bake up nice and crispy, so it doesn't hurt the mixture either. And then all you do is work it around in your hands, adding more dough, baking mix, or oil as needed to keep it from sticking to your hands or becoming too watery. Add a little bit more dough. That might have been too much. Try not to make too big of a mess out of the kitchen as this extra baking material kind of goes flying around. But you can see this is really starting to have a nice doughy feel to it. And the more I squeeze it and stretch it, the more those dough fibers work together to give it the kind of taste that's really going to be appealing when you eat it. As you work the dough, you want to try not to rip it. You want to pull it to where it's stretched but not broken. And again, as it starts to stick to your hand, go ahead and dump it back into the little bit of baking mix I have in the bottom of the pan and continue to work it until you get exactly the consistency that lets it form into a ball, lets you stretch it without it breaking, and does not quite stick to your hands, but still isn't all powdery. And I'm getting very close to that right now. All right, once the dough gets to a nice round ball that has the right feel to it, doesn't stick to your hands, but isn't completely dry, I'm going to set it aside for a second and move some of my materials out of the way so I can spread the dough onto the prepared pizza pan. Now, if you're really into the whole visual format of this, you can go ahead and do the whole throwing it up in the air thing like you see the Italian restaurants do on television. That's cool. I'm not coordinated enough to do that, so I'm just going to lay it in the pan and squeeze it out with my hands. I made a little more dough. That means my oven's preheated if you heard that beeping going on. I made a little more dough than I really needed. So if that happens to you, you certainly have the option of cutting the dough in half, freezing it, and using it for your next pizza. I'm going to just go with the really thick pizza idea. So it's an unintentional deep dish. And this is where you have to go around and put the little finger marks all the way around the outside of the pan. Why do we do this? I have no idea.